Michelangelo. Error code 400. Chapter 8, How to Rescue a Long-Lost Brother by Dummies. Notes. It's here. Sorry this took longer than usual. I struggled with Splinter's character, so I hope it's good. Make sure to leave comments, they give me motivation. Have a good day y'all, and during water DDD. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Hey guys, I'm here, what's up? April said as she walked into the living area of the lair. The boys all look at her as she enters. Smiles appear on their faces. Hey April, sorry about the late night call, Raph said, rubbing the back of his neck. Don't worry about it. I love spending time with you guys. Besides, it's Friday, so I can stay up as long as I need to, April responded, reassuring the boys in the room. Anyways, what's up? She continued, taking a seat in between Donnie and Leo. Well, just a few hours ago, we found something out. It's huge, Raph said, trying to explain, but before he could continue, Donnie interrupts him. She already knows, Donnie said abruptly. What? She knew about our missing brother too, Raph practically shouts, astonished by the news. Oh, is this why I'm here? April said, looking at Raph. Cause why didn't this happen sooner, like last week when I found out? April continued, but she got her answers by the looks on brothers. Wait a minute. You didn't tell them? April cried, looking at Donnie with a glare that could kill. Donnie backs up a bit, startled by April's sudden proximity, but quickly recovered to his bad boy persona. He crossed his arms, looking away from her glare. Scoff, of course, I told them, he said. April knew he was lying, and her suspicions were correct when she overheard Donnie mutter eventually. April just sighed. We'll at least know now, but we are going to chat about that later, April told Donnie in front of the group as Donnie stopped ahead of Sweat, afraid of the long lecture she will soon give. Well, I suppose that makes things easier, Raph said, trying to get back on topic. Okay then, let's get to planning, Raph said, pulling out a whiteboard. Wait, when did you get a whiteboard? Leo said, pointing at the whiteboard. Never had seen it before. That's not important right now, Raph stated as he popped off the cap to a dry erase marker. Right now we need a plan to rescue our missing brother, he continued, now writing something on the board. After jotting down a few things on the board, he turns to look at the group again. Okay gang, what do we know about the missing brother? Raph started moving out of the way so the others could see the board. On the board, Raph had written out in big bold words how to rescue our missing brother. He left the bottom empty for any info or ideas they could use to create a plan eventually. The room was quiet for a moment, thinking back on their interactions. Whoa, I got one, Leo said, raising his hand high. Perfect, what you bought, Leo? Ross said, getting ready to write Leo's response on the board. Well, thanks to Draxum, we know his name for. They refer to Draxum as father, and I think he has some beef with Gig Mama or something. Leo finishes as his brain draws a blank on any further information. Hey, no worries, it's a good start. Okay, April, you got something, Raph said, now centering his attention on her. Well, he has a mystic weapon like you guys, except he seems to have full control over it. Unlike you guys. No offense, she said, adding the last bit to not hurt their feeling too much. Raph quickly writes it down, remembering how strong they were with the weapon. Not to mention they threatened to burn Leo to a crisp. Anything else? Raph asked, turning back to the group. Well, after I found out we were related, I did some more digging in the DNA strand I found, and I discovered. Donnie started that he's an ornate box turtle, and he's at least 12 or 13 years old, give or take, Donnie said. Raph tenses at the mention of their age. 12 or 13? Raph thought to himself. He quickly shakes off the thought and proceeds to write Donnie's findings on the board. Okay, anything else? Raph asked. The group of teens shook their heads, already having said everything they knew. What about you, Raph? April asked. Raph thinks about any information he knows that hasn't been said. All we know about him is already up there, Raph thinks. He looks back at the board and his eyes grimace, knowing what's not up there. Well, there's one thing. Raph starts peeking at his siblings' interest, giving him the hint to keep going. Well, when I was approaching him I saw something, Raph continued, rubbing the back of his neck. Come on, don't leave us hanging, Leo said. I'm not 100% positive, but when I was approaching him back on the dock, I saw. Raph took a deep breath, knowing that his information was unsettling. He had bruising all around his neck, Raph said in a low voice. The group manages to hear this, though, despite the low tone. They were all but taken aback by that, especially with all the knowledge of him they had just shared. Leo let out a huff chuckle, trying to cope with this news. Are you sure? I mean, it could have been anything like a birthmark or something, Leo said with denial practically dripping in his voice. I know what I saw, Leo. His neck was red, even with his cloths covering it. You could see it was pretty recent, Raph said, only making eye contact with Leo to tell him how confident he was about it. The room fell silent, but you could hear their thoughts racing around in their head. The air is hot with anger that someone could hurt a child and still have them fight their battles for them. Eventually April's anger bubbles over. He's a kid, she said, venom dripping out of every word. How could that stupid goat man do that? She said as her fist tightened into balls. April. No. How could someone do that? April cried, standing up in her frustration. Her face was scrunched up. Heck, what are we even doing here? We should be out there trying to help him, she cried. Well, April, let's not rush things. We don't even have a plan, Leo said, trying to calm her down, and see how she was storming out ready to look for the box turtle. Not to mention we have no clue where to start looking, Donnie said, joining Leo. April started to slow down to a stop now, hearing what her Shorjit brothers were saying. As she came to a stop, one had a hand on her shoulder. She turns to see the owner, and there stood Raph with an understanding look on his face. I get it, April, you're mad. Heck, I reacted the same way, but the twins are right, we can't just power our way through this, Raph said, giving a reassuring grin. April smiled at his acts, with her thoughts recollecting. You're right. She chuckled a bit funny. Never thought I would get so worked up over someone I only met once, she said, her smile concealing the inner sadness she felt about having to wait to save the box turtle. All right, I'm good, April said, mentally shaking off her previous energy. Just these kind of topics aren't fun to talk about, she said, trying her best to put on a smile. Don't beat yourself up over it, Raph said, folding his arms together. All right, so what's the plan, boss man? April says, putting on her best vote of confidence. Raph smiles back. All right, here's the plan, Raph started. Boys, it's late, you should all be in bed by now, Splinter interrupted Raph as he entered the living area. The group looked in his direction, a bit shocked that the rat man was up himself. Oh hey Pops, good morning, fancy seeing you up, Leo started, seeing that it was well past midnight. As is to all of you. After all, I did grounded, Splinter said with a stern look in his eyes. That you did. But something came up, Leo said, sounding nervous at the end of his sentence. Splinter rose his brow as all the teens had the same facial expression, clearly hiding something. Well, he questioned the teens. Raph looked around at the others, silently deciding to tell their pops about the situation. Raph took a breath, knowing the news will devastate his pops. After all, his reaction to even talking about it made him shut down. He just barely started talking to them less than a day ago. We learned something really big today, Raph said, fidgeting with his fingers. You might want to sit down for this, Pops, Donnie added, seeing how Raph was uncomfortable sharing the news alone. Splinter could now feel the dread in the room. What happened? You all are acting like someone died, Splinter said nervously, chuckling as he took a seat on his chair. Something like that, Leo said under his breath, avoiding eye contact with his dad. Worry filled Splinter's eyes as the teens' faces became more unnerving. Dad, remember how you told us about our missing little brother? Raph started, once again feeling a silent responsibility to be the one to tell Splinter. Raph, I thought I said I was done talking about it, Splinter said in a bitter tone, looking to the side to avoid eye contact. I know, but this is Raph trying to continue. No, I will hear no more of this, Splinter said, now getting up to leave. Dad, please, you have to listen, Raph pleaded as his father walked away. I said enough of this. I wish not to hear about this, Splinter said, about to exit the living room, retreating to his living quarters. Dad, he's alive, Raph cried, squinting, his eyes closed as he yelled. Splinter stopped in his tracks, hearing the words. Everything felt frozen, no one moved or spoke. It felt as though the air had been sucked out of the room. Splinter slowly turned his head to look at his son, trying to comprehend what he just said. What? Splinter said in a weak voice that would have been inaudible if the room wasn't deathly quiet. Raph gulped as he continued. We snuck out and ran into Draxum and his goons. Draxum. You know Draxum? Splinter cried, his despair turning into confusion. Wait, you know Draxum? Tulio questioned. Of course, I know him, Splinter said, now fully facing the teens. He's supposed to be dead, he continued, seemingly in his head now. I saw the building collapsing on them. No one should have. Splinter cut himself short as memories of that night flood his mind. Dad, Raph spoke softly. Splinter looks at the teens, seeing looks of concern his way. Splinter inhales, trying to recollect himself. I apologize, Raffle. I didn't mean to shout, Splinter started. It's just, are you sure? Splinter gulped out, feeling tears threatening to form. Raph stood silent for a moment, afraid the news will drive his dad further away. Eventually, he spoke out. Yeah, we are sure. Donnie, do you think you can? Raph looked toward Donnie, pointing at his wrist to show him the video. Donnie looked between Raph and Splinter, eventually deciding to show the images to Splinter. It didn't take a genius to guess what the rat man was feeling. You could tell he was trying to hold back tears as his hand was over his mouth. By the time Splinter had stopped looking, the room fell silent again. Raph was sure Splinter would break into tears, rendering it impossible to talk to him. But to his surprise, he spoke. Splinter sniffed back up his tears. So what do we do? He said, turning to the leader and read his eyes glossy as tears still threatened to drop, but the look on his face said something different. Raph furrowed his face in determination. All right, here's the plan. Are you sure this is the place? Huggins said as they stared at a shoe store called the Foot Shack. I mean, that's what the crystal says. Michael said, staring into the crystal shard he received an hour earlier ago. Okay, but why would the boss come here? Munin said as they stared at the store. Well, there's only one way to find out, Michael said as he used his fundo to climb onto the roof. From there he found a window leading to a back room that was sealed off. Inside he could see people walking into a secret room that led down below. He pushes the window open, landing quietly on the concrete floor. The gargoyles flew in right after him, while he looked to make sure they weren't seen. But what he did realize was that the door was closed. Well, now what? Huggins said, staring at the wall that was closed. Maybe we should wait for someone to come out. I mean, they can't stay in there forever, Munin added. Or we could activate it ourselves, Michael said as he approached the entrance of the wall. What do you mean? Huggins asked him. Michael put his hands against the door. He could feel the magic cloaking the room behind it. It felt strange, though something more ancient. It's not too strong if I just... The tips of his fingers grew bright orange, growing against his arms. Whoa, Mike. Think this through. You can barely control it without the help of something already mystical enhanced, Huggins said, trying to intervene. It will only take a second, Michael said as the cracks ensue. The door was growing, the same cracks that were against his arms. The door was fully engulfed by the light as symbols appeared on the door. The door burst and disappeared, knocking both the gargoyles and Michael back, hitting the ground. Michael groaned as he sat himself up. The door was opened, revealing a staircase down further. See, I did it. And not even a scratch, Michelangelo said, looking at his arms and seeing the glow disappear as if they never were there. Inspecting his hand, he could see his hand shaking a bit from the sudden use of magic. Not to mention the sting coming off his forearms, but it would fade in a minute. Any major burns? Munin asked as he got up. Michael slid off his gloves to inspect his skin for any mystic damage. There was nothing but his older scarring from when he was a kid. The scars were almost completely gone, faded to the point you could never tell they were there in the first place. No, none, Michelangelo replied to the gargoyle. Good, didn't feel like telling Draxum you burned yourself, Huggins responded, proctoring an eye roll from the teen. Well, what are we waiting for? Let's head in, Munin said, already by the door. Both Huggins and Michael got up, joining Munin as they descended into the stairwell. As they descended, they could see it lead to a massive cavern lit up by many candles. What is this place? Huggins whispered as they head down. More like, what is that? Michael said, stopping by the side of the stairs, pointing to the armoire in the middle of the enormous room. Next to the armoire, they could see people talking, but they were too far away to hear what about. But what they could make out was the tall figure with horns sticking out. Draxum, they all thought. Michael pulled out his fundo in preparation to attack, but a loud voice was heard from behind him. Halt, intruder, they screamed. Michael turned to see who it was, but before he could get a good look, they had tackled him, sending him flying over the ledge of the staircase. They both hit the ground hard, as shell making an indent on the ground. He attempts to get up, only to feel pressure against his plastron. Looking up, he could see the person who currently had him pinned to the floor with their foot. Now, having a better look at the person, he could see that they were a young female girl. The human had a similar outfit to him, only in black and red for their wrappings. Their hair was buzzed off, giving her a stern look on her face. Who are you and how did you find this place? She spoke as she applied more pressure to his plastron. Michael reacted quickly, using the palm of his hand to crash into her foot, causing her to fall to her side from the surprise. Michael quickly gets up, readying himself for an upcoming attack, feeling footsteps. Where is Lord Draxum? He said, staring at the download human. She merely picks herself up, only to throw a shuriken his way, making him dodge the incoming blades. She leaped after him, holding a blade in hand to strike. Michael finally gains his balance, grabbing his fundo and activating its mystic flames. They both charge after each other, but are only interrupted by a raspy voice. What is the meaning of this? The purple human said. His words caused both teens to a halt, to look at him. The female reacted quickly, turning to the man kneeling, before speaking. I spotted them sneaking in, sir, she spoke. The man looks over to Michael, still in a battle stance, ready to stand his ground as the two gargoyles flew right behind him. The purple man merely looks to his right, to someone behind him. I believe that is yours, Baron Draxum, he said, motioning towards Michael. Michelangelo looked behind the strange purple man to see his father. Lord Draxum, he said as he bowed down with his hands to his sides. That he would be. Halt your attacks, Draxum said as he approached Michael. We wouldn't want to harm our new allies, Draxum said, placing a hand on Michael's shoulders, prompting him to relax. As he stood straight, he got a better look at their newfound allies. Both men were a shade of purple, one looking like a brute, while the other looked more bones than man. Are they even human? Michael thought. Next to them was the same girl as before, giving him the same look of suspicion he was giving them. Well, it was a pleasure meeting you, Draxum said, sticking out his hand. We can discuss more on these ancient artifacts you seek tomorrow, he continued as he shook their hands. Well, see you here tomorrow then, Draxum, the raspy-voiced man said as he let go. The two gargoyles landed directly on his shoulders as he ushered his pupil out. By the time they had left the building, the sun was ready to dawn. They continued to walk quietly until they reached an alleyway. Lord Draxum, who exactly were those people? Michael finally spoke up, speaking the burning question on his mind. Draxum turned to look at him, not really expecting him to ask. Well, they are an ancient ninja clan. He spoke as he opened a portal, motioning for Michael to head in first. As they entered, they were back at the lab, and Draxum continued. They had asked me for their help in restoring an ancient armor that will give its user enough strength to take down armies. And they want me to wear it, Draxum said, having a smug look on his face. Michael's suspicions raised. That's it. They expect nothing in return? Michael questioned, having done charades like this many times with Big Mama. Are you questioning my judgment? Draxum said, face now stern as he looked at Michael. Mish tensed up, knowing he was now out of line. No, of course not. My apologies, Lord Draxum, he said, adding a small bow. Good. Now go rest up. We leave early tomorrow, and I'm sure you're tired from today's events, Draxum said as he started to leave the room. Good night, he added as he left. Good night, Dad, Michael added under his breath, unhearable to Draxum. Michael had a bad feeling about this, and it didn't sit well with him. He needed to dig deeper into this mysterious clan and their true intentions, or someone was bound to be hurt. They both stood there for what felt like hours as Mikey cried into their shoulders. By now he had managed to collect himself enough to talk again. You know, Mikey started, his voice low in order to reduce the pain in his throat. I heard some of the champions say that they remember their first kill, Mikey stated. The other reptilian merely listened to the turtle humming in response. They said they remember every detail about them. Why, you know, aside from the fight, Mikey continued. Their eyes, style, clothing, even their names, Mikey said with a pained smile on his face, causing his friend to become even more concerned. So why can't I remember any of that? Mikey said through his sobs. His reptilian friend only rubbed circles on his shell in hopes of comfort. But his next words took him by surprise. You need to leave, Mikey said in a low whisper, his voice still in pain. What? The other reptilian questioned. You need to leave, Mondo, Mikey said, now looking directly into Mondo's eyes. You still have a chance to leave, he forced out his throat. Mondo took this to surprise. What are you talking about? I'm not leaving you here, Mondo said, trying to rear his friend. Michael coughed harshly before he forced himself to speak again. Nowhere in the same division you could be killed, Mikey said, pleading with his friend. Mikey, you need to relax, Big Mama's harsh but surly. This is enough of a punishment, Mondo said, letting out a pained laugh. I can't risk it. I'm bound to fight here. But you aren't. You could still leave, Mikey said, trying to raise his voice only for it to come out in a raspy whisper. He coughed hardly on it again. His throat felt raw and every word pained him. Mikey, stop. I'm not leaving you here alone. Okay, Mondo said, grabbing Mikey's shoulders, trying to relax him. Tears streamed down Mikey's eyes as he gritted his teeth. Mondo, please, was all he let out, as any more would hurt him worse. Look, there's got to be another way. But I'm not going to bail on y'all, Mondo said. Look, I'll tell you what. I'll lose the next round, Mondo said. Mikey's stomach dropped at his words, and tried to protest against the idea, but only coughed harshly. Mondo quickly shushed him, knowing that his voice was in pain. Hey, it okay. The punishment only extended to you, not any of the other fighters, Mondo said. How no? Mikey mustered out as he looked at him with concern. No one else was killed, just you and that, you know, Mondo said. This way I could still be here with you. And you don't have to wear your hair out, Mondo said with the best grin he could put on. Boo. No buts. This way I could help you out of this contract. Heck, at this point your dad might be our best option, Mondo said, trying to lighten the mood. Mikey let out a chuckle but proceeded to chuff again from the noise. Hey, take it easy or you'll lose your voice, Mondo said. See, nothing could go wrong with this plan, trust me, Mondo added, shooting a reassuring smile to him. Mikey thought for a moment, staring at the gecko. You okay? He nodded, agreeing with the plan despite the bad feeling in his stomach. See, we got this. Just me and you, Mondo said, smiling before giving Mikey a hug, which he gladly returned. Okay, you really need to shower. You smell like death, Mondo said, trying to lighten the mood again. Mikey giggled with a cough as they both got up and headed to the showers. Notes. Congrats, you know who our new character is. You were all wrong, grinning face, JK. I'm sure some of you probably thought it was Mondo. Have a nice day, DDD.